everyone. Welcome back to Easy FIU podcast today. And I have our guest, John Casmon, with us. And I'm very excited to meet John. And John runs a very successful podcast. And he also is a partner over 900 unit apartment buildings, units. And his focus is mostly on Southeast corner, but also in the Midwest now. And so John is doing this kind of full-time-ish. He's kind of reached a lifestyle that he desired. So very excited to have John over here today. And he's also a master of marketing. So we'll kind of get into some of that aspect as well. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show today. I'm really excited to talk to you and talk to your audience.
Awesome. So John, walk us back a little bit. When you think about your childhood, we always ask our guests this. What is kind of like your humble beginning or fantastic beginning? What kind of influenced you to be the person who you are today?
Yeah, growing up, there wasn't a whole lot around. So, when we would ask for things, usually the answer was no. So you learn to figure things out for yourself or try to find a way to make things happen. So parents obviously did everything they could to provide for us. But, for me, I started to learn and just recognize that, hey, we weren't wealthy by any means. We weren't poor. But we were kind of lower middle class. So, but there were things where, even if it was a field trip or something like that, you need a little bit of money. It was a struggle to come up with that. So it was eye-opening in a sense, in a way that I realized that this was something I didn't like. I didn't like not having the means to go out and do things that seem pretty simple. So that always kind of steered me down a certain path. I was kind of entrepreneurial as a kid. I used to sell everything from candy to I would exchange video games and try to sell them and, do sorts of things like that, cleaning up, getting jobs. I started working when I was 13 years old formally. So I had my first real job at 13 on a work order program. And pretty much feel like I've been working ever since.
Yeah.
But
what is this work order program for 13 years?
Well, it was basically you get a worker's permit, if you're not at least back then, if you weren't 16, which was the regular age to start working, you could get a permit to start working. So I think it starts at 13 years old. So I got a permit to start working at 13. So it was the first time I was like a W-2 employee making, money and having the government take out their check, their cut of it. So that started back at 13.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. And how did you stumble upon that work opportunity?
I was at a company my stepmother was working at. So they were looking for some folks to come in and just do some record work. So it was a company where they actually they housed medical records. So I came in and did a bunch of, I would pull medical records. I would also sweep the floor, clean up the warehouse. But then I would, somebody would hand me a list of records and I would just need to pull them and go put them in a box and they would be shipped out to whoever needed them from there.
Nice. That's awesome. And tell me a little bit. So you said you were entrepreneur even when you're a little kid. Is there a figure, a person, whether it's books that you read or someone in your life, that if you really kind of thinking back is somewhat influential to that type of thinking? It was just kind of something that you figured out.
No, definitely. My stepmother played a big role in that. So she was always entrepreneurial. She was really the only person I knew personally who was entrepreneurial like that. I recall distinctly when I was a kid, I was probably like maybe 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10. And she had these gloves, which, in 2020, this would be a huge business, but go back maybe 20 some years and maybe 30 some years. We had these little latex gloves and huge boxes. So we were driving around beauty salons and I would go in and try to sell them. So we got them for $1. I would sell them for $3. So I would go in as a little cute kid walking into the beauty salon. Hello, ladies. We've got these gloves here for sale. They're $3 a box. Who wants one? So I would go in and I would sell these latex gloves to these beauty salons. And we went through and we drove around the entire city and sold all 60 boxes. We sold the whole case that we had,
Yeah.
and made $180. So
Well.
came back home, and I was like, man, this is easy, like crushing this. Like, and I was a nervous kid. I didn't like speaking, and so it kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone to have to get out there and start flat code, sales pitch out of the gate.
Yeah.
But I did it, and we made this money. And talk about being an entrepreneur. I learned at that point how money is divided, because I thought we were going to split that $180, and I just made $90. And I
Right.
got a crash course on materials cost and gas and, all sorts of other fees that came into it. And by the end of
Yeah.
it, I made, I think like 20 or $30. And I was like, I quit. I said,
Hmm.
I get you. I'll take my 20, $30. I'll quit, and I will negotiate my compensation prior to doing a deal in the future. So that was a tough lesson as a kid. It makes sense as an adult. And my
Yeah.
stepmother's point was like, well, listen, if you go work at McDonald's, just because you're at the cash register doesn't mean you get to keep half of whatever comes in. Like
Yeah.
you're an employee, you get this
Yeah.
role. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't own McDonald's. Like I did most of the work. So
Yeah.
we went
Yeah.
back and forth for a minute there on that. But nonetheless, point was well taken, and definitely some good life lessons.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's amazing. Like when you have a figure in your life that kind of helps you and just kind of treating you as an adult, in terms of learning these concepts. So let's kind of fast forward a little bit more. So what is your first W-2 job? Like, I guess you talked about the 13-year-old, but like when you kind of grew up, I guess if you count that 13-year-old as your W-2 job, like kind of fast forward, what is your in your concept, like the first adult, like a W-2 job?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I mean there's the jobs we work as kids and
Hmm.
teens, right? And then there's
Hmm.
like the first career job. So
Yeah.
I mean as a teen, I did the record pulling job for a while.
Hmm.
I actually did that for like 2 years, 2 summers. Then the first like part-time job I had was at a pizza restaurant.
Hmm.
So a gourmet pizza shop. I did
Hmm.
that for a couple of years. Then I went off to college and worked different jobs, throughout college. And I would say
Hmm.
my career at that point, I knew I wanted to be in marketing and advertising. So
Hmm.
I got an internship at a major advertising agency in Detroit.
Hmm.
And coming out of that I actually got my first full-time career salary position
Hmm.
at an advertising agency in Cleveland. And this is, my advertising career. This is the thing I went to college for. I'm super excited.
Hmm.
And I lasted 8 weeks at that job.
Wow,
And
what happened? Yeah.
well, they tried to tell me that it was a regional office job, and
Hmm.
I didn't understand what that meant, and I didn't care
Yeah.
what it meant. And when you're young,
Yeah.
you're just focused on selling yourself, right? And getting the
Right.
job. And you're not really realizing that this is a two-way street and that job may not be the right
Yeah.
job for you.
Hmm.
And coming off of the experience I had, I mean, my internship, I was doing new business pitches.
Hmm.
I mean, I left my graduation because I had to do a 9 a.m. meeting on a Sunday the next day
Hmm.
in Detroit. So I graduated, walked the stage, and then that night I drove back to Detroit
Hmm.
for a new business presentation, or prepping for the new business presentation. I was on Monday. So I
Yeah.
was used to that level of stakes and creativity. And
Hmm.
I thought that's what I was getting into. This was an
Yeah.
advertising job.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. The regional office basically, I was cold calling McDonald's in Anchorage, Alaska, asking them if they had any specials. And
Hmm.
I just felt silly. I mean, I used to sell those gloves to beauty salons, and I felt like
Right.
this was worse than that.
Yeah.
I'm calling some 16-year-old in Alaska asking them if they have any specials right now. And they're like, what? Who calls McDonald's to ask if we have specials? Like what?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just felt so silly. And I had this chart. I had to keep track of all of the franchise owners, and I wasn't making much money at all. I mean, I literally calculated it was like if I just worked full time minimum wage, I'm only making $5,000 more
Wow.
than that. And like, who went to, I was like, economically, this just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Factor all that into the fact that I was also running a group home that I just started at the time. And I was stretched a little thin. I was really disappointed with the work. And it got to the point where I tried to quit 4 weeks into the job
Hmm.
because I realized this wasn't a good fit. This was not what I was
Hmm.
expecting. And they didn't want me to quit because they had a lot of work that they had to get
Right.
done.
Right.
And we just ended up parting ways mutually. We just realized it wasn't a fit. They were I asked about the working hours. They told me, oh, people just come in and do it. I'm like, nope, it's 8:30 to 5. People
Yeah.
worked 8:30 to 5 with a 30-minute lunch. Like, it was crystal clear. If you watch everyone, that's what they
Yeah.
did. And like,
Yeah.
you guys didn't, I wasn't used to that. I was used to
Right.
going for my internship. You came in whenever you wanted, but you left when the work was done.
Hmm.
So if you took an hour lunch, you probably would be there till 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. And
Right.
that's kind of what I was used to. Was like, hey, just give me the flexibility to do everything I need to do, and I'll figure out a way
Right.
to get it done.
Right.
And that just wasn't the environment. It was a straight office job, so it just
Hmm.
wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah. So you left that job. It's good for you that you found out this very early versus crushing your soul for a couple of years.
Yes.
And so you found that this is not really a good fit. What do you do then?
Well, I had the group home, which was something I was, I poured everything into. The problem was I wasn't making any money doing that. So
Hmm.
we were getting the house ready to start accepting, some of the kids. And it just wasn't there yet. We had to get our license. We had to go through all these inspections. So I was there every day getting it ready,
Hmm.
and trying to honestly figure out my life. I mean, I hit a down point because I had no money coming in. I had just graduated, and I quit my dream career 8 weeks
Hmm.
into it, and I was living at home, sleeping in my mom's basement. I mean, I felt like a loser,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't reconcile how I had gotten there, even though I knew the reasons and the choices I had made, and a big chunk of me was saying, "Just go get a job. Like, forget
Hmm.
this. Just go get a job."
Right.
And it took a minute, but ultimately, the internship was so important because um, I had really done an excellent job at the internship to the point where they called me every month to ask me what I was doing.
Right.
So
Right.
they called me and I was tell them, "Hey, I'm good." And they're like, "No." And then finally they called again and I said, "Yes, I'm open. Like, what do you have?" And
Right.
they had this opportunity that would take me to back to Detroit. So after thinking about it some more, I ended up saying, "Hey, listen, I think we got the group home in a place where it could run. My family was operating it. I kind of served my part to do that, but that wasn't my background. I didn't really know, anything about child services or social services or anything
Hmm.
like that, but I
Hmm.
was interested in real estate. So that's kind of the reason they pulled me into it. It's like, "Oh, you like real estate?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really
They
interested in real
lured you
estate."
into it. Yes.
Yeah. So I got pulled, another family thing, right? So I got pulled
Yeah.
into that, and I had a degree, and somebody you had to have a bachelor's degree
Hmm.
to open up a day or a child care, or not child care. What is it called? It's respite care or group home facility. So anyway, I did that, and then at that point, once we got that up and running and kind of stabilized, I went back into advertising, and I'd spent the next, I don't know, 10 to 13 years
Hmm.
really focusing just on advertising and marketing.
Gotcha. It's kind of interesting because usually when kids kind of graduate from college, the intuition for them to do would be just accepting what they have done in internships and kind of have that bridge over there. And it sounds like there's some resistance for you to kind of go back to that. Like, what was the kind of reasoning? Because it sounds like you did enjoy your internship, but what was the kind of reasoning you decided not to go back?
I
Um,
love the internship. The reason
mhm.
was the group home. The
uh,
group home was
so
solely
home,
the reason. Yeah, it
yeah,
was
home,
my family opened it, so we
yeah.
we had opened that. I think we started the process to buy the house in
Hmm.
November of like 2002 or something like that,
Yeah.
and so we or 2003 maybe, and there was a woman we hired who was going to be the executive director, and she was a
Hmm.
friend of the family.
Yeah.
And something happened; they had a falling out. And long story short, by the time springtime came,
Yeah.
she was either out of the picture or walking out of the picture. And the easy solution was, "John, come home and help us get this thing going."
Hmm.
And at least that's how it played in my head. Obviously it could have been different, but I felt like I wanted to come home and be a part of it. We named it
Hmm.
after my grandmother, who was the
Hmm.
woman I adored the most in this world, and I wanted to make sure that I played a part in making sure this thing was going to be successful.
Hmm.
So that was it more than anything else. I mean, the internship was a great fit. I enjoyed
Hmm.
my time there very much. They gave me opportunities that uh, I really I really adore and treasure, because they gave me chances that a lot of young people don't get as
Hmm.
interns, especially
Hmm.
young people who look like me. Um,
Yeah.
and when I talk about being a part of that new business pitch, I wanted you to understand I was with the president of the company. You know, it's a
Nice.
1,000 person agency, and I'm sitting here with the number 4 person in charge on a
Yeah.
Sunday morning at 9 a.m. in the room.
Yeah.
So when you talk about feeling privileged and like you have been invited to sit at the table and be a part of it, I
Mhm.
absolutely got that experience. So
Mhm.
it was very difficult for me to turn it down, but I felt like
Family.
the priority was the family thing. And then once that got where it was going and I kind of served my purpose and I didn't
Yeah.
feel as appreciated there.
Yeah.
It was like, all right, I just feel like I sacrificed everything to come
Right.
home and make this thing happen, and no one cares. Like
Yeah.
I literally got a part-time job as a waiter, and I just kept thinking about that Kanye West song where he talked about, graduating at the top of the class and going to cheesecake and being a waiter. That's how I
Yeah.
felt. So
Yeah.
I mean, at that moment, I realized, listen, you can't put off your personal dreams for someone else's dreams.
Right.
And I know a lot of people do that, especially folks who are going to school. Maybe you're studying a topic that your
Mhm.
parents wanted you to do. You're living a dream that's not really your dream.
Right.
And
Right.
and I felt like that's what was going to happen to me. And I
Mhm.
was kind of down that path, and it wasn't even a dream at that point. I was just living a life that wasn't my life, and
Yeah.
I realized the only way to change that was to make the adjustments necessary and take the accountability and take the
Mhm.
proactiveness and make it happen for myself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, did you feel like you learned lessons from, the whole kind of experience, going back to the family experience, that should, some of our viewer, if they're stuck in that situation, what would your advice be to John during that time?
I think the biggest thing is you have to do what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you recognize you're not happy, you have to step back and make adjustments and not worry so much about what other people are going to think or how it
Mm-hmm.
impacts other people, because their happiness can't be tied to you. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
have to all make ourselves happy, whether you're going through a relationship issue, family issue. I mean, for me, I felt like I was sacrificing for my family and I wasn't getting that same thing back in return. And it kind of created a strain on the family. And ultimately, if I would have stayed in that situation, there would have just been, remorse and regret and a
Mm-hmm.
feeling of blame. And that's not fair. And I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm saying that's how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing you can do is go off of how you feel and do what you need to do. And
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about, the impact of other people. If you disappoint someone else, that's not your fault. Their
Mm-hmm.
disappointment is not your problem. It's
Right.
them and their expectations for you. They
Right.
shouldn't they shouldn't make up expectations for you,
Yeah.
And I know it's easy to say, but I kind of had to go through this. And that's why it took me almost, 6 months to process all of this, to say, you want to go back into advertising, why don't you go back? Oh, I do, but I need to stay here. It's like
Right.
it took me 6 months to get to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm going back, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to enjoy
Right.
it, and I'm going to build the career that I had envisioned for myself up until this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, to that point too, it's like, if you don't want to be there, there may be a better person that fits for the position that will you be there. So the way to kind
Absolutely.
of think about it is, also like, perhaps your family don't think at the time, but perhaps you're doing them a favor, by kind of pursuing your own dream. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it. I mean, this is something where the vision was for me to, I was a stopgap. I was
Yeah.
never supposed to be the lead, which again, I wasn't the lead person, but the goal was, let's go find the right person for this role.
Right.
That just took a long time.
Yeah.
But to your point, yeah, I mean, you want to find the right people and put the right people in place to be
Hmm.
successful, as opposed to trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah. Agree. Great. So fast forward, you kind of got into the advertising. So yay, you're back to the advertisement. You're doing it for 10 to 13 years. So it sounds like this is something that you like to do, but what kind of changed your mindset from there, like from the W-2 events that kind of lead to, or if there's a transition period that maybe happened way before, that kind of lead you thinking about, hey, I gotta like be my own boss or going financially independent. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I enjoyed my job, and I've always enjoyed marketing and advertising, and I rose up the ranks,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and had a pretty good career there. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
got hired by General Motors, and I was working there and doing some great campaigns. I mean, some fun stuff. I was working Super Bowl and New Year's Eve and
Oh,
going to
fun.
Maxim parties and doing video shoots with 50 Cent and all sorts of stuff, right? So I'm
Nice.
living the life. And I was like in my mid to late 20s.
Yeah, it's like a
So
dream
I'm
job
living the
for.
life, right? This is like
Yeah.
so simple. I'm doing video games, right? We're in like basketball games and football games, Madden,
Yeah.
and like, dude, I'm like, yes, this is great.
Yeah.
What happened was 2008.
Okay.
2008 happened, and I'm at GM. And as a matter of fact, I recall getting a call from finance asking me about a contract and whether or not we had signed it. And I said, nope, we're supposed to sign it later this week. They said, no, you're not. You're not going to sign it at all. And I said, excuse me, we've already given our commitment to signing. And they're like, nope,
Hmm.
you're not going to sign it at all. And they hung up on me. And I said, wow, that was very awkward. So I went and told my boss, and he said, well, that's weird. Let me find out. He
Hmm.
made a couple phone calls and said, yeah, don't sign that. And I'm like, okay, like no one's going to give me any more context. And
Right.
I didn't get any. About 2 weeks go by, and it starts to become evident that we're having some financial issues.
Hmm.
You fast forward, you get later into the spring, going into the summer. I don't know if you recall, but like the three CEOs, the big three Detroit automotive companies,
Hmm.
all went to Washington to kind of talk about what was going on. And
Hmm.
in short, that certainly, as you fast forward that, it goes to the point where it's clear that we're going to have to go through some sort of bankruptcy. They bring in the cards are after the election, and I watch some of my peers get let go.
Hmm.
Um, we closed down about 4 brands, so we had 8 automotive brands. We closed down 4 of them, and so we're down to 4 brands ourselves. And I had a red light on my phone the day that they were going doing layoffs,
Hmm.
and I had been told I was fine, I was gonna have a job and not to worry, but I saw that red light and I'm like, "Oh, crap." So I sit down, I wait before I check the voicemail, I wait for about 20, 30 seconds. And finally I say, "All right, just push the button, dude. Just like they told you were safe. Just push the button. If
Hmm.
if that's not the case, then whatever." I push the button and it's actually one of my colleagues, and he's talking about that he just got let go, and he had been working there for 20 some years,
Hmm.
and he had planned on retiring there, and he doesn't know how he's going to pay for the medicine that he needs or health insurance or what he's going to do. And as I'm listening to this voicemail, I am saddened for him, but I am also saying to myself, I never want to be in a position where I have no control over how I eat and how I get the food and the medicines or whatever I need to survive for me
Hmm.
or my family. And at that moment, I said, corporate America will do this, because what happens shortly thereafter is, there's a person who rolls up and they made her like, I don't know, like vice president or something.
Hmm.
Well, the next person they brought in didn't like her and they shipped her halfway across the world to Shanghai.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this woman has a 15-year-old son. Could you
Yeah.
imagine having a 15-year-old kid going from California to Detroit and then to Shanghai all within a matter of 4 years?
Totally
And
got
just like,
Shanghai, right?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and it's like it's one of those things where, like, do you want to be in a position where you can't control where you live? And I was at
Hmm.
that point where I was going to have to go to the field.
Hmm.
Like, hey, you've made it up the corporate ladder,
Hmm.
but in the corporate ladder, something in the corporate America, you have to check certain boxes.
Hmm.
And I was at that point where it's like, if you want to go to the next level, you're gonna have to check some more boxes before you can do that. And
Hmm.
I felt like I didn't want to do that, and I needed change, so I moved over to the agency side of the world.
Hmm.
And shortly thereafter, I started really focusing on investing in real estate. And that was really the key for me was, no matter what company you work for, if
Hmm.
you're not in control, someone else is going to decide when your last day is. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to dedicate myself to a company
Hmm.
just to be told when that last day was. It just didn't feel like the right way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of incident. And then so that's 2008 to now. That's approximately like a 10 years or something,
Mhm.
11 years or so. So you started doing investing. How did you kind of get in there? Like what are the stuff that you did to start
So
your new job?
I started investing in a way that I would tell anyone to get started if you can, and that is through a house hack. So
Hmm.
buy a 2 to 4 unit property, live in one unit, rent out the other units. I think it's the simplest way to get into real estate, you can bring the least amount of money down. So I only had to bring 3.5% down for a down payment with an FHA loan.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to ease into being a property manager or landlord or however you want to frame it up.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think it's really important to do that, if you can, is I was already renting. So going from renting an apartment to owning the building, but still living in just an apartment while I rent out the rest of the building,
Mm-hmm.
mentally it was an easy transition. I was just moving from this apartment to that apartment, and
Mm-hmm.
instead of paying the rent, I had other people paying me, and I was paying the other bills.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an easier lifestyle transition. The second reason I think is really critical is if you can do this and live in neighborhoods that you would want to live in anyway,
Mm-hmm.
then you are really focusing on building building relationships with people who are going to be your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
So your renters are going to be more like-minded. They're not going to be these nuisance tenants that ruin your life, because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go in a neighborhood and you're going to screen for tenants that are basically like-minded and going to be your
Mm-hmm.
neighbors in just different lifestyles. So that's going to make life a little bit easier for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the third thing is, as you're looking to build confidence, if you go into a deal like that, you don't need crazy returns. You don't have to be an amazing underwriter or an amazing
Mm-hmm.
property manager to be successful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you put 3.5% down. If you buy a $200,000 property, that's $7,000 down. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to make a great return on your investment. If you're living rent free or just paying a little bit of, the mortgage yourself, you're going to make a strong return just based off of those dynamics. And if you can do that, build equity,
Mm-hmm.
gain some confidence, gain some experience, that's going to make it easier to roll off into your next investment. So that worked really well for us. We bought that 2-unit property. We invested a little bit of capital into it, and we bought a 3-unit building after that. And then that kind of really took us off in our investing.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you said we did that. So like, were you like, is that your spouse in you? Like, is our partner?
Yeah, my
Um,
wife and I.